Hello and welcome. I'm Diego and this is Beatmaking 101. Today we are going to go over some basics, just learn the basics of the program we're going to be using for this beat making process, which is going to be FL Studio. I'm going to kind of guide you around and teach you about some of the buttons and all this. It looks kind of complicated, but I promise you it's not that hard once you get the hang of it. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into it. So first of all, I want to talk about this number right here. This is going to be your BPM, which stands for beats per minute. And you can think of it. Oh, well, I like to think of it kind of as a clock in some sorts. I'm gonna press this button right here to mute this beat. I have an example beat to listen to, but we're gonna do that in just a second. So to control your BPM, you can just click and hold, and then scroll up or down, and you're gonna see that that's gonna affect the length of my beat. So if we put it to 60, for example, that means that there's gonna be 60 beats in 1 minute, or one beat a second, which is like a clock. So I'm gonna play right here. So to do that, you have to turn on the metronome right here, and I'm gonna click that button on, and now you're gonna hear it. So this is kind of like a clock, 60 beats in 1 minute. I'm gonna go back and keep it at what it was originally, which was 130. There we go. And that's basically just I'm gonna play this too so you can hear it much faster, right? So this is basically to set the speed of your beats. Usually for my beats, I like to set it anywhere from 140 to 170. That's probably the highest I'd go for making a beat. Although you can also make a beat in halftime, which is kind of cutting the beats, cutting the time in half. So instead of say doing 120, you do 60. So instead of there being, I'll listen here. Instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4, it's every 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's like a double time is what it's called. Anyways, I'm gonna go back to 130 as it was before, and yeah, basically the only button you should really know about right now is this one right here, which is the metronome, and the play and pause buttons are right here. Next up, I am going to go over these buttons right here and kind of the primary buttons that I like to use. The first one is what you're seeing right now, which is the playlist. So the place is where you have all your sounds, all your everything you have on your track, and that's how you arrange your track, right? That's how you move and chop stuff up and shorten and lengthen, etc., etc. Next up, right here, we have the channel rack, and the channel rack, right now you only see this one thing because it's audio, but if you go to all here, you can see all these things I have. By default, you're gonna have a click, a kick, a clap, a hat, and a snare, right? And I can actually just get rid of these because I don't need them at all for my beat right now. So yeah, this is basically where you can control all the sounds you're using. So say for example I want to add a kick into here, so I'm going to drag the kick from this left side, and this is where you hold all of your sounds. This left side, by default FL Studio comes with a sound pack, so I'm going to be using that. I'm going to go into drums, and I'm going to go to kicks, and I'm going to get this kick, 808 kick, for example, right? And you just drag it straight into there. And the channel rack is really useful because it lets you sort out all the sounds and stuff you have. Additionally, you can click in notes like this. I'm going to click something right here, and I'm going to play it so you can hear what I just clicked in. And to do that, I'm going to make sure this button right here is orange. So if it's gray like that, you click it for it to be orange. When it's orange, it plays the channel rack. So let's listen to that. So you see here 1, 2, 3, 4 like that, right? And I can do just 2, maybe 2. So you can click in notes and patterns in here, which is really useful and helpful. And yeah, thirdly, this button up here is the piano roll. The piano roll, however, is it's better to, so right now I'm using the piano roll for the 808 kick, right? But say I want to do, maybe I have another sound in here. Maybe I have I don't know, some kind of hat. Sure, we'll have this sound. I'll turn this down, it's a little bit loud. Put that sound in there. Say I want to do the piano roll for that. Well, this is the 808 kick, right? You can change it right here, kick or hat right there. That's the hat. Or another way to do it is to go into the channel rack and you right click, piano roll right there. So the piano roll is really useful if you want to click in notes with so it's like a piano. So the higher you go, and the lower you go. So this is mainly used for making your melodies, and you can actually click in each note like that, and that's how it's helpful. And this is how I make my melodies, and how you know most people make their melodies is in the piano roll. Um, One thing I want to touch here before we move on forward is this button up here called the magnet button. And the magnet button is basically going to set the snap of your note. So I'm going to zoom in, pressing Control and the scroll wheel to zoom in here. And like you see, the lines are here. So there's a line here, a line here, a line here. And with these lines right now, the snap is set to step. So if I want to move this note, it's going to snap to these lines, right? But say I want to put the note right here. So then to do that, you have to go in here and change the snap. So maybe do half step, and that would allow me to move it even more precisely. If you want the most, I guess, precise, you do none, and then you can move it, as much as you want. I'm going to zoom in even further to show you how precise this is. This is literally like, you move it exactly where you want. Usually to avoid melodies and things not being offbeat, you want to set it to either step or half step maybe, or even bar if you're doing a super simple melody like that. I usually personally keep it at step because that allows me to work with some interesting, rhythmic melodies or, rhythmic elements without it being completely offbeat. So yeah, other than that, the next button that's really important here is this one right here, and this is the mixer. And the mixer is really interesting. I know it looks kind of huge and everything, but the mixer is really cool because it allows you to put effects and things on your sounds. So say I'm going to go back in here, we're going to listen to this beat I made. This is one of my beats, and we're going to take a little listen here. Turn it down a little bit. Okay, so say I want to put some effects on this beat or a sound that you have, etc. You would do that by going into the mixer here, and I'm going to actually make it a little bit smaller so we can kind of see both at the same time. And I want to put this beat I have into the mixer. So there's two ways of doing that. One way is by simply double clicking the sound that you have in your playlist here. So you're going to go to the playlist, you're going to double click it, and right here, the top right, it's going to say track. And you can, click and hold and then scroll up to assign it a track, and if I go at track 1, for example, and go back into the mixer, now this sound is going to be routed to this insert 1. And I'm going to play the beat, and you're going to see it right here. And let's say if I want to change it to 2, maybe. I'm going to go to 2 there, and then I'm going to play it again. Now it's at 2, see? However, when you have lots of different sounds, doing this can be a little confusing because you don't know what each thing is, I guess. So the way I like to do it, I'm going to set this back to 0, is by going into your channel rack and selecting the sound. This is example beat right here. Make sure this is in green, so you're going to click it until the only thing, this is only green, the only one. And you're going to go back into your mixer, right click whatever channel you want. It can be 1 or it can be 30, it can be any one you want. I usually like to work from left to right, just because that's my way of doing it. So, once you make sure your sound is selected here, you're going to right click in the mixer, channel routing, route selected channels to this track. And as you can see, now it has the same name and color, so it's a lot easier to distinguish what sound is being routed to each track here. So, there it is right there, right? Quickly right here, I am going to go back and explain some of the knobs and buttons that you might have seen when I double click a sound here. So this is kind of going to tell you the settings for each sound. So right now the sound I've selected is the example beat, but this can also work with maybe one of these kicks I had before. Let's put this kick back in. I could double click this one, and then I could see the sound settings for this specific sound. So like I said, right here is where you can route the track to the mixing channel, or the mixer. But there's some other handy knobs here. Let's see. So obviously the volume knob will change the volume. I'm gonna play this so you can hear the changes in real time. So as I lower this knob, the volume will be lowered. This knob here is called the pan knob, and the pan knob is gonna move the sound from left to right. So I'm gonna play that and move the tam on all the way to the left, all the way to the right. So unless you're doing some sort of special effect, I usually like to keep this centered. And if you ever want to reset these knobs, you can just right click them and click reset right there. Right click, reset. I'm gonna lower this a tiny bit. The pitch knob here is gonna alter the pitch of the beat, so let's hear that. It's gonna take a second to load up here. There we go. Now I'm gonna bring it down. So the pitch knob is useful if you're working with samples, and I will be using this pitch knob more later on in the course where we work with samples to make melodies. And it's really handy to kind of move things around and find notes that sound right with each other as well. The in and out knobs are useful sometimes, sometimes not really. Basically what they'll do is they'll shorten, it'll make kind of like a swooping effect. You can kind of see it there. And same for the out knob, it'll make the same effect but going out. I usually don't use these knobs that much. So yeah, those are kind of the main ones you should worry about: pitch, pan, in and out. Trim. These other ones can be useful, but I usually don't use them that much. One quick thing: if you are ever experiencing kind of weird difficulties with your sounds or your tracks or anything, a good rule of thumb is to just come in here and right click these knobs and click reset. As for the time knob is none, but for these just reset them. And many times, because even if it's something tiny like that, it can mess up the whole beat. So if I ever have problems with the sound or something's not sounding right, I always make sure to come in here and reset these 3 knobs, just because that usually seems to fix most of the problems that I have. So yeah, one quick thing that is super important, but it's also super tiny, is this button right here, this stretch button. And I'll show you the difference here. So if I have this stretch button turned off, when I grab right here, let's say I'm going to grab the end of this beat and I'm going to drag to the left, it's just going to start cutting out like that, right? However, if you turn the stretch button on, it'll actually start stretching it in like that. So super important thing to keep in mind, this tiny button, I use it all the time. So yeah. One more thing before we move on are these kind of buttons right here. I kind of already explained the magnet here. The magnet also works in the playlist. So if I set it to bar, I can only move this beat every one of these lines. However, if I set it to none, I can move it as finely as I want, precisely as I want. The pencil tool is the one you're going to be using the most. That's what you do everything with. If you want to copy a sound, you can just click it and then click again, and it'll copy the sound as many times as you want. So that kind of makes the paintbrush tool a little obsolete. The mute, it will mute, obviously. Actually, it'll delete. I'm sorry, this is the mute. The mute will mute. The one I use the most are the pencil and the chopping tool, or the little kind of razor there. It's really helpful if you want to, maybe I want to cut out this sound right here. I can precisely cut that out like that and just delete it like that. So super helpful. Only really 2 ones I'd keep in mind using, or I'd consider using, is the razor, the kind of box cutter, and the pencil. Finally, I will be explaining Edison, and Edison is super handy for lots of things. And you can access it by clicking this button right here. This will open Edison. And kind of the main purpose of Edison is to record stuff and record sounds in your beat. So let's say I really want this beat to have, I'm going to go here and pick a sound maybe. Let's see. I think there are some sound effects. Here we go. Maybe I really want my beat to have the sound effect, right? So I'm gonna kind of layer that, and when I play this beat, you're gonna hear the sound effect there. right? But they're not one thing. If I delete the sound effect, then that's gone. So what Edison will do, oh, actually just delete it. Let me put that back in there. What Edison will do is it'll record whatever is being played in your playlist. So it's really helpful if you want to kind of layer things together, or maybe like I said, layer two melodies together, or maybe put a sound effect into your beat, um, or maybe just record a tiny part of your beat that you wanna um, do something to. There's a lot of uses to it, but I'm just gonna show you how to use it. Again, lots of complicated buttons, but it's very easy to use. So I'm gonna start playing this beat, and then I'm gonna click the record button right here to record it. So let's hear it. And a good indicator to know that it's working is if you see the sound right here on this, like that. See? So I'm gonna just start recording. I'm gonna maybe skip forward a little more. And stop. So now I'm gonna play this right here, and you're gonna hear that it has that sound effect right there. So maybe I want to put this in. So there's two ways to do it. You can either drag it in like this, or you can just click this button right here and that'll put it into here. So now I'm going to mute these two channels and you're going to hear it right here. Like that. See? So that's kind of, I guess, the basic use of Edison. I will be using Edison more later in the course because it has some really neat features to it as well. So yeah, with that, I think that is a wrap for the first week of the basics of FL Studio. Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.